Hi everyone, welcome back to Young and Wifed Up. This is Marcella.
And I'm Gabby.
And thanks for joining us this week for another episode.
Before we get into today's topic, I want to make sure to take some time for our season finale episode to thank all of our Patreon supporters that have been with us for season 6. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say the first names of all of our Patreon supporters that have been with us for season 6. And to show our appreciation, give you guys a little shout out and thank you again so much for all of your ongoing support. We could not have done this season without you guys. And stay tuned after I give the shout outs for updates on what the next few months will look like on Patreon. So let's begin. Thank you to Katie, Jocelyn, Kaya, Lynn, Denise, Megan S., Mary, Chloe, Catherine, Teresa, Shannon, Christina, Megan T., Stephanie, Micah, Abby, Megan C., Maddie, Dank, and Deanne, Bailey, and Mariah. Thank you so much for all of your incredible support. We have had so much fun this past season, and we could not do any of this without you guys. Without you guys helping and supporting us and contributing financially, following our Patreon page. And we also want to give a shout out to all of our Facebook girlies that join our free supportive community. We love you guys. Thank you for making our group fun and for engaging in conversation. And we are just so grateful and thankful that we get this opportunity to share our lives with you guys, talk about things that we're passionate about, and share the love of Christ with you guys, and just come alongside you as fellow young wives and doing this together and being community together. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate all that you guys do. And if you would like to continue to be a patron, or if you would like to become a patron, we have a lot of exciting things for the next couple months. Even though our main platform podcasts are going to be on pause, we are going to be active on our Patreon account, including bonus episodes. We're still going to be doing our Queen chat and any discussions, digital downloads, all of that stuff is still going to be active. So there will be new stuff. But instead of doing our regular episodes, we're going to be transitioning to a book club. So Marcella, any news on the book club?
Well, the best way that you can keep up with book club stuff, wow, say that 10 times fast. If you're interested in joining in on that, is to honestly just follow us on Instagram and join the Facebook group for updates. This is not only for Patreon subscribers, as far as I know, right? This is going to be available to Facebook girlies.
Yes.
All of our community and all of that. And also ditto to everything that Gabby said. Thank you to all of our patrons, to everybody who's in our Facebook group community, those who share, those who message us, encouraging us with how you listen to our podcast, and now it's been an encouragement to you. And we are just so thankful for everybody who is involved in all aspects of the podcast and all of the relationships that we've been able to build with all of you guys.
Yes, thank you all so much. And I also want to give a shout out to those that watch our YouTube videos because you guys are
Yeah.
a small but mighty number. I know we always harp on this and it's like everybody's like, okay, we get it. Nobody watches your YouTube. But truly it is it is an interesting situation that we weren't posting on YouTube for the first few seasons that we did Young and Wifed Up because we thought that people only listened to podcasts. But we started putting our episodes on YouTube as well. And although we don't get as much of our audience from YouTube, we still appreciate those of you that do watch our podcast instead of just
Yes.
listening and just see, especially like the transition from when Marcella moved, the production quality changed a lot because she's
Yeah.
now across the country and the setup is not as cute as it used to be. But we still have our friends on YouTube that watch us. So thank you guys so much. You all know who you are. And
Yes.
we hope that you guys stick around. And we couldn't do any of this without all of you listeners. And we appreciate all of you. So, okay. Usually we end our seasons with a bang. It's like our trend is we kind of leave controversial topics to the end of the season and then we peace out for a couple months. And it's not that we're trying to run and hide. It's just like kind of like the peak of our discussions.
Yeah.
You know, we pick something fun to talk about. And so we have talked about, if you've already figured out what we're talking about due to the title, we've already talked about trad wives before. And I don't know why on my notes I did not include the episode number, but I will make sure to link this episode in our show notes so that you can go listen to it. I do think it may be important for you to listen to that one first before you
As like
listen to this one.
Yeah, as like a precursor to
Yes,
maybe a
because
foundation of where we're coming from.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because excuse me, I had just told Marcel I had a giant dinner, so if I burp, like please excuse me. I'm gonna try my hardest not to, but we ate this giant dinner with like steak and potatoes and Brussels sprouts, and then we all shared a
That's
Coke
not very
together.
it's not very trad wife of you
I know it's
to
yeah,
be belching.
I know. If I belch on the episode, that's going to be the more controversial thing that happens than anything else.
Ay, ay, ay.
But anyway, I'm just going to do a quick review of kind of our main points, but please go listen to the episode if you already haven't before you listen to this one. But I'll just go through the main points that will be relevant for this conversation today. So in our last episode about trad wives, we talk about how we appreciate the new trad wife trend and we see the good that it can do both in the Christian world and the secular world. We also encourage those that genuinely like the different trad aesthetics to enjoy themselves and see it as a fun motivator for homemakers. But we see it only as an aesthetic. We don't see it as like you're telling everybody that they need to dress like this or have their house decorated like this or whatever. The things that we caution against is lifting up a specific time in history or off-grid living lifestyle as holier or more traditional than our current time period or those who choose to live in more urban or metropolitan areas. We also offer a gentle warning to trad wives that doing quote unquote traditional tasks does not save you or always show the true fruit of the spirit. So it's not inherently virtuous to do traditional things.
Mhm.
The things that we see as virtuous and holy are the actual virtues that are described in the scriptures in various passages, including Titus 2, Proverbs 31, and Ephesians 5, a ton of passages in scripture that talk about virtuous women. And the Proverbs also has not just 31, talks about the vices and the virtues of women. We ourselves, Marcella and I, identify as traditional wives, but we desire more to be viewed as biblical wives. We want to be biblical in how we behave, how we are perceived by the world around us. And a lot of the things that we do that we think are biblical vocations do kind of have overlap with tradition, if that makes sense. So
Mm.
it can be kind of hard to parcel out the two. And that's why I think this conversation today is relevant, because I think that we can so easily become offended by things on the on the internet that really aren't something we need to be offended by. So for example, I am not offended as somebody that lives in a suburban metropolitan area. I live in Las Vegas. I live in the suburbs of Las Vegas. I am not offended when I see traditional wives that are Christians talking about their off-grid living. I do not, and they're like sharing their lives and they're excited to share and talk about the benefits of it. I am not personally offended by that just because that is not the lifestyle or the region that I live in. To me, I admire them and see like this is where the Lord has them. They enjoy it. They're
Mhm.
thriving. Good for them. You go, girl, you know? But I've never taken those things as like they're telling me you are wrong for living in a suburban area or living in a city, and the holier thing for you to do would to be living on a farm. Do you
Mm.
have any examples like that where it's like something that you see on the internet that you think is a good thing, but it doesn't really apply to you, but you're like, wow, that's great for you. Like, I'm not offended as a fellow trad wife.
I mean, yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you in a sense that we live in a suburban neighborhood. We're closer to countryside, I would say, than
Mhm.
you guys are.
Yeah.
But we don't have all this property to be able to homestead and like,
Mhm.
do these like extra things and like um and so when I see other women doing that, I'm never I never think that they're alluding to like that they must be working harder or are holier or X, Y, and Z just because they have property or animals or, a garden or like, a bakery or like a small bakery, all of these like different things that we just kind of, I think, I
Attribute.
say, or I mention those things specifically because that is usually what I see other women kind of picking a bone with because I do think that most people are not living on tons of acreage and this it's not as common
Yeah.
as families who are living in suburbia and that sort of thing and so, so sometimes you'll just come across videos of homemaking accounts or people who like to garden a lot or who like to bake a lot and it's like well and they still happen to also maybe talk about their religion or the Christianity or anything like that. And for some reason, people end up mixing up the two and then they're
Mm.
saying, well, you just because you're doing that doesn't make you better than the women who can't. It's like who is saying that? And I know we're gonna get to that pretty
Yeah.
soon. We're gonna sparse it out a little bit more, um but yeah, I have noticed that does tend to come up more about that sphere. And it's funny because I don't really see that happening the other way around. Like I
Mm-mm.
don't see people who live very clearly a suburban lifestyle. They're, more modern. They, maybe like more technology in their lives and in their house. I really don't end up seeing, and I could be wrong. I'm not in every single account on the face of the planet on social media. It could exist. I usually am not seeing like the homesteading women commenting on their stuff and being like, you think you're better because you live in a suburban neighborhood. And so I don't know. It seems to really only more so go one direction. Anyway, you can keep
Yeah,
talking.
I totally agree. And I also think that one thing that we forget in these conversations about internet subcultures is
Mm,
that we don't see a lot of the other side of it. Like,
right.
we're not seeing a whole lot of like city girl trad wives or
Mhm.
or even like one thing I see happen so much on a lot of these homemaking accounts is people talking about where's the husband? What is he doing for you? What is he? And I'm
Yeah,
like, what? You want him to make an account about his blue collar job?
right.
Will that satisfy you for
Yeah.
you to see? Because it's like you aren't seeing, you're only seeing what.
What she chooses
Yes.
to
And like
post.
it is
Yeah,
for so many people, it's just a creative outlet. And then sometimes they can like monetize it. And that's
right.
all it is. Or they're
Yeah.
just sharing, like they're educating or they're sharing something. And like people are like, oh, well, what is he doing for you? All I see is what you're doing for your husband. And it's like, okay,
Mm,
do you all honestly want to see like, okay, so say like I was being accused of that, which I haven't been, thankfully, because I'm only a micro influencer and not a an
yeah,
actual one. Okay.
yeah.
If some was like, all you post is you cooking for your husband and you doing this for your husband and you doing this for your family and cleaning and doing this, I'd be like, you guys cannot be serious. None of you want to see my husband in his office all day, like working on his computer because he does it for 8 hours a day so that
Yeah.
I can be here cooking and
Posting on
cleaning and
social
posting
media.
it on social media. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent and I'm not sticking to the script now. Obviously, like this is something
I'm
both
sorry.
you and I can
I
just
I
go
led
on and
you down
on.
that path, so I
Yes,
apologize.
it's okay. Well, this is our last episode for the season. So if we go on our little tangents, whatever, like everybody's going to just have to deal with us. Anyway, so this is there's two things that I wanted to talk about that have happened recently in the conservative or Christian world.
Mhm.
And I think it's actually a blessing that we haven't spoken on these issues sooner because I had a couple people ask me about these things and ask me to talk about it or to address it or if we could address it in the podcast. And I had been like, I think we will. Maybe we'll save it for a later episode. And it's been quite a few months since both of these events happened. And I think it's a good thing. One, because I think we should be slow to speak because we can be so easily triggered by something and
Mhm.
then be quick to speak instead of letting things kind of play out and see if people retract or if things turn out differently. Um, and so I think sometimes it's good not to always address something that happens in the conservative or Christian sphere
Mhm.
right away. I think that there's people that are good at responding to things right away in a very respectful way. And I think the rest of us should like sit back, see how things continue to play out, and then maybe say something if we think it's necessary. So, why do I think this conversation is necessary? I think that there is a problem, not just among, and I'm going to be very specific because we talk a lot about secular trad wives and the world in our last episode about this topic, but I want to address the people that are self-proclaimed conservatives, self-proclaimed Christians, self-proclaimed believe in biblical gender roles. So those are kind of the people that I'm responding to that I think are unfair to the majority. And I'm going to say the majority because I do know that there's a small minority of trad wives that are like could be dangerous or could
Mhm.
be like not helpful or
Mhm.
even just like they're actually cosplaying, and it's actually hurting our community. Okay.
Right.
But the overwhelming majority of trad wives on the internet are not a danger to our young women. Okay. And who is a young woman? So usually when I hear people talking about the danger wives are to society, it's mostly towards the next generation of women. So maybe the women that listen to our podcast that are either unmarried young women that are maybe like fresh out of high school, like reevaluating, like if they're going to do a career, if they want to get married young, or even if they're dating or if they're engaged. And then also women that are newly married, that sort of thing. People that are speaking the loudest against the trad wives are say that they are most worried about this vulnerable, quote unquote, vulnerable population of young women that are going to be hoodwinked into being homemakers and traditional wives and stay-at-home moms, and that it's a danger to them.
Mhm.
Yes. So I'm going to get into it. There's a couple videos that Beth Stucky is a political commentator. She also talks a lot about like different theology issues. She's an influencer. She has a podcast. She has a YouTube. She's all over the internet. Very, very, very popular. If you don't know who she is, she's worth looking up. We've actually talked positively about her on this podcast. We like her book, You're Not Enough, and That's Okay. We talk about that book in length in one of our episodes. I think it's called Negative Affirmations. That's what the episode is called. And we recommended and endorsed her book. So I just want to make it very clear. I have in the past been a huge fan of Beth Stucky. Over the years, I've become less of a fan and more of kind of just like a cautious observer. Because she does a lot of things that I don't agree with or says things that I don't agree with. And if you're interested in what those things are, I'm willing to have a discussion about it. You can send me a DM on Instagram. But this more recent thing that she talked about, I think was an extreme mistake. I think it was a really harmful and hurtful thing to say and talk about other women that honestly are probably the majority of her audience.
Yeah.
So there are two videos. I'm not going to link them, but they'll be easy to find. One is the Founders Ministry panel discussion. This video can be found on Twitter if you just look up Beth Stucky Founders Ministries panel. And then another video that I'm pretty sure it's still on her Instagram, pretty easy to find, where she talks about trad wives and stuff like that on a reel, where she's essentially continuing what she said in the panel. So there's two public videos where she talks about it. And again, I kind of waited and watched. I follow her on her platforms and tried to see if she would retract or maybe explain. And I wasn't really satisfied with anything that she fleshed out later on. She did, I think, try to backstep or explain a little bit of what she meant. But I do think, like, ultimately she misstepped. And I think that she's wrong about the things that she talks about. So these are the main points after watching those videos. And again, looking, and you guys are free to go find those videos and make your own judgments, of course. Like, don't just take everything Marcella and I say as law. Go look for yourself. These are the main points that she makes that I think are problematic and can actually ostracize women that are in her audience, and also can be just like unhelpful as we are fighting against a culture of death, against a culture that hates men, against a culture that hates children, and against a culture that hates God and his and his word and the things that he thinks are good and beautiful. So the 3 points are, first one, trad wives think that making sourdough or gardening makes you more holy. The second one, you don't need to make sourdough or cultivate a garden to be holy. And thirdly, trad wives think that you need to achieve a certain aesthetic to be a biblical woman. And she fleshes these points out in her 2 videos that I just talked about. So let's start with the first point. Trad wives think that making sourdough or gardening makes you more holy. What do we have to say about that? Is that true? Do trad wives really think that?
I mean, me as a trad wife, I cannot say that I think that. And honestly, I don't really know or see any trad wives that also have expressed that sentiment that they are somehow holier
Mhm.
for making sourdough or gardening. So I don't really know if she's just like kind of inserting um meaning to things that shouldn't be
Mm.
inserted. But yeah, I mean, obviously, because of the circles that we run in and, you know, our interests and our hobbies and um our beliefs and all that, we follow a lot of like
Mhm.
self-proclaimed trad wives. And
Mhm.
I really don't think I've ever seen
Mm-mm.
anything that has come close to even expressing that. And
No.
I think that, you know, maybe there's been like a, well, this is why I do this. Like, this is
Yeah.
how I'm serving my family, and
Mhm.
this is how I've chosen to serve my family best. This is what's helpful for our budget. This is what's helpful for our health. And it's like for so many reasons. And then I feel like I was saying before, obviously this is making assumptions, but I just don't really, I'm not really sure what other option there is here, but I feel like people insert meaning into explanations of that sort of, this is why I've chosen to do this. And
Mhm.
then people will turn that around and say, okay, well, if you think it's a good enough reason for you, you think that it should be a good enough reason for everybody to do the exact same things that you're doing.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's like we don't know if those accounts or people on social media are explaining those things or expressing that or sharing it because people have been asking them to, or
Yes.
because they
Yeah.
wonder, like, well, why do you do that? Why
Mhm.
are you gardening? Why are you finding the time to do this or that sort of thing? And it's like, you know, like we really just don't know like the ins and outs of that situation. So yeah, I don't really know why she would feel the need to make that statement because I really haven't found that to be true, and I feel like a lot of women could probably say the same.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
yeah.
I do think that there is, specifically in this era that we're in right now, especially what we're seeing on the internet, that there is a new resurgence of women recovering the lost arts of homemaking, including
Mhm.
making bread and gardening. And
Mhm.
therefore, we're sharing about it.
Mhm.
So just because the tradwife influencers are the majority of people posting about sourdough, it doesn't mean that they are binding other people's consciences
Right.
to also make sourdough, you know?
Yeah.
Sharing what you're learning about and what you're excited about and what you've been learning yourself for your
Mhm.
family doesn't immediately mean that you're putting others down that aren't doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, if there are and again, both you and I have not seen this on the hundreds of counts that we follow. If there are women out there that are saying things like, you are not a biblical woman unless you are making sourdough, then of
Mhm.
course, like, that is an overgeneralization. it is not a sin to buy bread
Yeah.
at the store. Like you and I would both be hypocrites if that were the case, because we
Yeah.
both, in times when we are not actively baking, if like, especially if, you're postpartum or I'm in a flare up or whatever, we rely on store-bought bread. It is not a
Mhm.
sin. Neither of
Yeah.
us think that. And I genuinely don't think that anybody genuinely believes that,
Okay,
you know?
I have a theory here. And I understand, like, we on the podcast have listeners from various backgrounds and that
Yes.
sort of thing. So this may be why we aren't seeing it. I'm just trying to maybe give the benefit of the doubt here with some of this, that maybe people are seeing this stuff and we're just not for some reason. I do wonder if there are accounts from other religious backgrounds that are
Mm,
also trad wives that are
mhm.
more works based, I will say.
Yes.
Maybe that is where they're seeing it.
Mm,
Maybe not necessarily in Protestant circles.
hmm.
Um, that there is more of an emphasis on you have to do these certain things because this is truly the only right way to love your family, or I don't know. It's just a theory that I have. I've never
Yeah.
actually seen that. I don't have any evidence or proof. Um,
Yeah. And I
but
do
that
think that maybe,
it could be an option, or
yeah, I do think that we can, even in our own selves, like, sometimes I can feel discouraged if I am not prioritizing a certain homemaking skill in my family and I see another
Mhm,
woman that is really good at that skill, I can start
mhm.
to like feel like negatively, like, oh man, like I'm not doing that. Like, but she's
Like
doing
a
it. And
comparison.
so she must think she's better than me because she makes the time to do this and I don't.
Mhm.
And we're imparting intentions on other women, which is wrong because we ourselves are struggling with maybe some envy or discontent, or even just like we just have different priorities. Like,
Yeah,
I
which
am
is
not
okay.
gardening anything.
Yeah.
I live in the desert. Like, I would like to learn how to garden right now. My biggest problem is keeping the plants that are already in my backyard alive. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's like, but if I wanted to focus all my energy into learning how to cultivate my garden, learning how to do that, then that would be maybe to the detriment of other homemaking skills that I prioritize. But
Mhm,
then I could cultivate my garden. But there are women
mhm.
that also live in the desert, just like me. They are not making everything from scratch in sourdough, but they love to garden or they have backyard chickens, and that is their priority. And they put all of their time and energy into that. One is not better than the other. We all
Mhm,
have different skills. We all have different
mhm.
priorities. We all have different interests. I
Yeah,
do think that a lot of these things are like interest based. And that if we imagine if all of us only knew how to bake sourdough and did not do any other skills, that would be
right,
so boring. And we
right.
would not be able to have like a community that helps
Yes,
one another and shares with
yes.
one another.
Yeah, there's definitely merit in, I think, being able to be content with the natural gifts that God has given you. And that isn't to say that you shouldn't lean into the things that are maybe more challenging or that
Mhm.
don't come quite as easy. Um, but yeah, like you were saying, it does really create a community, especially among women, when there are varying skills between
Mhm.
all of us that we can share and come side by side with each other to cultivate with each other. And yeah, if we all were only experts at the same thing,
Yeah,
like that just we know reasonably that just would not make sense.
exactly. So I think this is good to get into our next point
Yeah,
that
yeah,
she makes is
yeah.
that you Christian woman, you don't need to make sourdough or cultivate a garden to be holy. And this is one of the points that she makes. She goes from, the tradwives are telling you this, but I'm telling you that you don't need to do this. And
Mhm.
obviously, based on what Marcella and I just discussed, this is a true statement at face value. But, and I want you to hang on with me for a second before you lose me, okay? We do see examples in scripture of holy women growing or making homemade food for their families, as well as buying and gathering food from afar. Homemakers do have more time in their day to dedicate themselves to learning the lost arts, such as bread making, gardening, preserving food, sewing, etc. We
Mhm.
do. If you are a stay at home mom full time or a homemaker full time, and even if you aren't doing it full time, but the majority of the time you are home and maybe you have more of a part time job or you work small hours, you do objectively have more time as a homemaker to cultivate those skills. And that is a way that we can be a blessing to our family. We do see over and over and over again in scriptures. I don't want to bore you with bringing out a ton of references. It is so easy to find of holy women in the scriptures doing both, making their own food and gathering food from afar, sharing food with one another. The overwhelming majority of women needed to make bread from necessity until the Industrial Revolution. We live in a very, very, very blessed time of access to food in our Western civilization, where the majority of us have the choice to either make bread at home or buy it at the store. Other civilizations, even currently, bread is still a necessity to make at home. And I also would like to make the argument that for a lot of us that live in one income households that have to learn how to be a little bit more paired in on our budget, that sometimes bread making truly becomes a necessity. It
Mhm.
has been in my family for a lot of things where other parts of our budget needed more help. Food has become like, okay, we need to make more food at home. I need to
Mhm.
figure this out. And
Yeah.
so it is virtuous for a woman, for the good of her home, outside of it being a hobby, because it can be a hobby and an interest and just fun, but it is a virtuous thing and a holy and good thing for women to take the time and skills that the Lord has given her to cultivate things in her home, whether that be a garden, whether that be bread making, whether that be sewing things, whether that be cutting hair for her children and her husband. These are ways that the Lord blesses our homes through us. So,
Mhm.
again, I agree with Allie that you don't need most of the time to do these things to be a virtuous woman, but that it still is a virtuous thing to pursue. It is something that we should consider, especially if we are being stewards of the time that we are home, especially if we're home full time and our husbands are working.
Mhm.
How can we use our time wisely that the Lord has given us, that our husband allows us by him going to work?
Mhm.
And what are we talked about this in our stewarding episode, stewarding the money that the Lord has given us. We made a ton of ideas and points about how women at home can cultivate ways to where they're growing their husband's income at home without needing to go and get a job. And
Mhm.
so it is virtuous. Do you have anything you would like to add to that?
Hmm. there was something that you said that I was going to like add on to, and now it's floated away.
Was it something about like how like we have the choice to go out and buy bread or make it at home? Was it
um,
about
I don't remember what
I'm
it
trying to
was,
help?
but I know it's okay. Yeah, no, I do agree with what you're saying, and I think like the bread making specifically. I don't know. So many people have a bone to pick with the bread thing. I don't
Yeah,
know, like, but it's just bread. Like the bread didn't do anything to you. Um,
like just taste the bread. Do you want
yeah,
some
yeah,
bread?
yeah. But I do find like with sourdough, it just like being able to make most of your baked goods at home is generally when women want to start doing something. Like maybe they feel like they have no skills as a homemaker.
Mm,
The bread making seems to be one of the easiest and cheapest and money saving ways and time saving, maybe not time saving, because obviously it's less time to just buy bread already made than like making it. But it's not quite as labor intensive as like sewing curtains would be, or like
right.
sewing clothes, or like starting a whole garden.
Mhm.
Because I feel like there's a lot of upfront costs with some of
Mhm.
these other things, and it's like I have to be able to dedicate quite a few hours like in order to be able to do this. But when it comes to just making a very simple loaf of sourdough that is just flour and water and salt, sometimes that is the first and only thing that women can do that they feel like they can take back and
Yes.
like that they can cultivate on their own. And so I feel like that's maybe why we see a lot about bread making specifically,
Mm,
because it is such an easily accessible skill to learn as a homemaker for women who want to um, strive to learn more, to get more skills under their belt, to eventually maybe they want to just cook from scratch more often. And most people eat bread. Most families have bread on on a very regular basis. It's easy for
yeah.
children to eat. It's easy to send with your husband to work, sandwiches and things like that. And so um, we we can't just automatically assume like, well, everybody's doing this, so somebody must be telling them that they have to do this in order to be holy. And it's like, well, I don't think so. I think it's just that this is one of the most easily accessible skills to get
Mhm.
into when you are trying to cultivate more of those things at home, working with your hands and that sort of a thing. And so that's what I wanted to
Yeah.
add on to everything you just said.
Awesome. Okay, let's move on from the bread. I think
Yeah,
we've driven our point
about the bread.
about the bread. And listen, like, if that is not a skill that you currently want to learn, like, but you would love homemade bread, ask your girlfriend, "Hey girl,
Mhm.
can I buy bread from you once a
Yeah.
week? Or would you be willing to like give me any extra baked goods? Or I don't know, like, can we barter? Can I offer
Mm,
some skill of mine to exchange with bread that you make?" Like it's I don't know. I just think bread is just like such a community thing,
yeah. Yeah.
and I think we should
Yeah.
stop being scared of the sourdough
Of the bread.
girls. Like,
Honestly,
what is the
like,
worst thing that can happen? You
yeah, and
that you
honestly,
eat it
like,
and you like
who,
it? Like,
yeah, like, I was gonna say, like, who, like, truly, who doesn't love homemade sourdough more? Like, who's really gunning for, like, the store-bought loaf? Like, I really want that wheat bread that you bought from the store as opposed to this lovely, like, sourdough loaf. Like, people just appreciate, and it's such, like, a an amazing way to be hospitable too, like for table fellowship, and just like it just adds a touch of yourself, you know,
Yeah.
into eating, which you have to do every day, all day. So,
Yes. Oh
anyway,
man. All
all right,
right.
now
I
we're moving
promise we're
on
done
from the
with the
bread.
bread, guys. I
We're
promise.
done
I
with the bread.
promise. Until it comes back. And then we'll be back on the bread. Okay. So the last point I want to make in regards to the Beth Stucky videos is that she claims that trad wives think that you need to achieve a certain aesthetic to be a biblical woman. And again, referring to our last episode, we do address this. We have addressed it. I really don't think anybody is binding people's consciences about their home and clothing aesthetic. And if anybody is, if there are genuine people accounts that are doing that, then it's like, okay, like of course we can agree that's ridiculous and dumb, but like most trad wives or homemaking accounts, if they're wearing dresses all the time, or if they love the 1950s, or if they're really into the prairie girl vibe, like most of them are just like nerds, dude. Like you're hating on nerdy girls dressing up. Love like it's like it's just like why are we making this like you're telling everybody like we need to
Yeah,
dress like this and you're
yeah,
so oppressed your husband's telling you to dress like this. I'm like she's living her Little Women lifestyle. Leave her
yeah,
alone.
yeah,
Anyway, again, nobody has ever said this as far as I know. Now again, I'm somebody's going to come out of the woodwork and send me an account and be like this girl did it. But it's like, okay, if there's a minority of people that are doing these rage bait type things, we should be careful to not make blanket statements about trad wives in public spheres then.
yeah,
Because if we are saying the trad wives, you are saying anybody online that is making homemaking, homesteading, trad wife content. So I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's
mhm,
fair to punish the most of the trad wives that are truly innocent and just being nerds and loving to wear dresses,
mhm,
um, because maybe one or two people are saying that everybody must wear ankle length dresses and never cut their hair. I've never seen that as far as like somebody that's a actual self-proclaimed trad wife. There are other people that like are more like on the religious side of the social media sphere, but they also happen to be trad. So there's some overlap. But as far
yeah,
as the trad wife subculture, it is rare to none that
yeah,
I've seen this. And
yeah,
although we agree, we've seen people that can glorify a certain era and make that the biggest part of their accounts. It is typically not the Christian trad wives that are doing this. Most of the Christian Protestant trad wives on social media choose only to wear dresses or like to imitate old homemaking practices because they just genuinely like it. They love to wear dresses. They love to decorate their home mid-century modern. They love their chickens, not because they believe everybody must wear prairie dresses
yeah, or
or
have
have
an
a
English cottage, or
yes, or be cottage core. Like it's somebody can enjoy and love something and share it and it not mean that you also have to do it.
yeah,
I'm going to give you an example. I love to use a old-fashioned ostrich feather duster, which is definitely considered more of an old homemaking tool that majority of the women don't use these days. Imagine if somebody saw me on my low waist homemaker account using a feather duster in a video and then proceeded to accuse me of imposing an era or outdated practices on others. That would obviously be so comical. It like we can all agree that would be comical. Like everybody knows that you have preferences. People
yeah,
have preferences. Like some people will prefer to use a Swiffer duster. Some people will just want to use a wet rag. Some people use their paper towels. I like to use a feather duster. It does not mean that I am then, because I am showing myself on the internet using a duster, that I am imposing the
Yeah.
feather duster on others.
Yeah.
So we should not make bad create bad intentions of other women on the internet sharing things that they just like
Yeah.
and say they're telling you, Christian woman, if you're not wearing a prairie dress, you're not a Christian or you're not a real trad wife or
Yeah.
whatever.
I think also maybe like some people could say like, well, that would be fine, except for it seems like all of the trad wives wear prairie dresses. Like, why isn't there more variety in style and that sort of thing? And it's like, I think this is where maybe it gets into the territory of things that are objectively more beautiful. And
Wow.
nobody wants
I'm
to
scared.
nobody wants to say something is better than another or prettier than something else. And so it's like, I think it would be better for everybody all around if we can just say, well, all of these big trad wife accounts, maybe they do lean more towards these things um, because they just think it's prettier. And other people, maybe a majority of people also think it's prettier, even if that's not maybe something that you personally like to wear or personally like to do and how you like to decorate and how you like to use your property or whatever it is. Maybe it's just like, and it's just so you guys, we just take ourselves so seriously. Like, we just need to stop taking ourselves so seriously. We're doing this off of Instagram, which is mainly an image based platform. Like,
Yes.
can we not say that, like, looking at a well cultivated garden is a beautiful thing to look at?
Right. Right.
Is not those the dresses that they're wearing, are they not beautiful? Like, I can truly say that a lot of it is. And so it's like maybe that's why, not necessarily because I feel like now I have to go and do those things the exact same way that they do and has the same priority in my life and everything. But sometimes it's like, people go through these accounts and it's like, wow, what a beautiful image, on these accounts. What a beautiful account this is with all of these pictures of, their children and, this pretty clothing and the beautiful bread that they make and all this stuff. It's like sometimes it truly is just that we are also enjoying
Mhm.
the beauty that they are sharing in their
Mhm.
lives that they are cultivating. And I think it would do us a service to maybe think of it that way as opposed to um this is just what you do if you're a trad wife. And we know
Mhm.
that's not true because there in all of the female population, there is such a small percentage of them that actually have large social media accounts.
Yes.
Most of us are nobodies on the
Yeah.
internet. And
Mhm.
so I think we forget where we are in the world and the bigger perspective and like I don't know, maybe we just need to go outside and touch some grass. But like I think like we can sometimes forget that there's something about social media specifically. I think Instagram is like the biggest roadblock for people at this point because that's where most people are finding these kinds of accounts
Mhm.
because it's image based. It is beautiful to look at the things that they're doing and that they
Yeah.
share and that sort
Yeah.
of thing. And sometimes people truly just love to look at it um, because it is beautiful. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
No, I agree. I think like something that we can take from this is like I want to be careful because Beth Stucky is a sister in Christ, and
Yeah.
a lot of women have responded. A lot of the trads, Christian trads, have responded to her. Some that I'm personal friends with that listen to the podcast, and like I appreciate a lot of the public responses, because we do believe that when you make public statements that you can publicly address those statements. Like, I don't need to text Beth Stucky personally and say, "Hey girl, can you like think about the things that you're saying?" Anything that is public, and she's a public figure, and she made a lot of blanket statements about this culture of tradwives. It can be publicly responded to. And a lot of the women on the internet that agree with us on these topics have like responded to her or commented on those posts. And I think that it's important that we remember that some women just have different priorities in their life.
Mhm.
Allie's priority in her life is, of course, like, she's a mother, she's a wife, she's a church member, but her primary job that she does with most of her day is she is a public figure. She's a political figure. She does political commentary. She has a platform. And so that is a lot of work. She does work, and she shamelessly shares, on her social media
Mhm.
pages, that she is a working mom, you know?
Mhm.
And so I think that what would be more honest if she had, wanted to say something about the trads, is if she said, me and my family decided that I'm going to be a working mom, and doing my podcast and doing, all these things. That's my priority. The trad girls or the full-time homemakers, they have more time to make bread, to cultivate their, 1950s style home, to have chickens, to do the gardening. And you know what? I just don't really have time for that. And that really could have been it.
Yeah.
And I think that that would have been the more honest truth of, like, a lot of the people that are critical of the trads, whether you're on the internet or if you're just doing it silently at home, and just, the only people that see you are your husband and your kids and what you're doing.
Mhm.
I think that the people that are critical of living a more traditional, or, what we consider like biblical, of like your primary vocation being a homemaker, um, I think that if the more honest thing would to be like, that's just not what we decided to do as our family. And I have different priorities. I just think
Mhm.
that that would have been a more honest thing. And I don't think that the things that she said in those videos publicly for all of us to see were in good faith, like truly honest, like an honest assessment of the tradwife subculture on the internet.
Mhm.
And especially those that help her and her platform, that are her audience, and that are fellow Christians. Like, I think that we can say, like, like, I mean, for me, myself, like, I can speak for myself. I could spend more time if I wanted Young and Wife Up to have a bigger audience. I could dedicate a lot of my time, resources, and mental energy into doing a lot more marketing, being on a lot more platforms, posting a ton more on social media. But for me and my family, we decided that I would be a full-time homemaker. This is what I love to do. And this extra stuff is an outpouring of my main job. And that is the honest thing. We should be honest. It doesn't mean that I think Beth Stucky is imparting on me that I need to spend more time on my podcast.
Right.
So I just think that we should be generous with others on the internet, because you're only seeing a very curated,
Mhm.
small sliver
Yeah.
of their life. You're
Yeah.
not seeing what their husbands do all day. You're
Mhm.
not seeing the little ones running around the house, because most of the trad wives don't show their children. They're not showing the errands that they run or the groceries that they buy. They're showing their hobbies, the things that they love and are interested in. They're sharing
Mhm.
the things that God is teaching them, the ways that God is sanctifying them in their life, the things that they're passionate about. And sharing, this is what I've learned. And if you choose to follow me, I'm going to share with you the things
Yeah.
that I'm learning. And
Yeah.
if we are offended or think that they're binding our conscience, we can choose to not follow and scroll on by and move
Yeah.
on with our day. And like you said, go touch some grass instead.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we also just shouldn't be surprised because it's not like all of us live in completely different cultures and economies, and that we do generally all feel the same pains in a way and
Mm,
are feeling the same burdens of, financial troubles, or there are things that we all kind of share in a sense. And so I feel like we shouldn't be surprised when we see trad wives kind of all um leaning into the same types of hobbies. And it's not necessarily because, like you were saying, they're trying to bind any. They're all trying to do this like group persuasion thing of let's try to, like you were saying, hoodwink all of these other women into thinking that they have to do all this stuff. It's like we just so happen to be feeling some of the pressure and hurt in the same areas. Um,
mhm.
that we've all kind of just come to the same conclusion, have just so happened to come to a similar stance of, okay, maybe this is a way that I can cultivate skills. These are certain things that this is the most easily accessible thing. Because, like I said, we all kind of live generally in like a very similar, American, for most of our audiences in the US,
Mhm.
cultural, economic background. You're not dealing with, you know, other countries with vastly different um cultural and economic backgrounds. And so it's like we really shouldn't be surprised that they're all kind of seeming to land on a lot of similar things, because we see the lot we've been given in this day and age that the Lord has chosen to put us in. And sometimes we're inspired by others too. Like, wow,
Yes.
it's a good idea that she's doing that. I think I can do that too, and I'm going to start. Maybe I can start sharing about my journey with this and that sort of thing. And so maybe that's a reason why there isn't so much of like a variance between, you know,
Mhm.
between
Yeah.
skills and like working with our hands, what exactly that entails, and
Well,
that sort.
and like not only that, we don't only influence each other on the internet, but there's a lot of ways where we don't realize that we influence each other in our own social circles. Like,
Yes.
I can give a perfect example. Like, our friends, when we were all living in Southern California together, we were all in similar stages of life, going through, being more natural minded, being more quote unquote like crunchy. And we influence each other with like, what are you buying? Oh,
Mhm.
what is this swap that you got? Or even like, all of us kind of all got onto homeopathy like around the same time. And it's because we're
Mhm.
sharing with each other,
Right.
talking about it. We're
It's just a yeah, it's a
we
natural
influence
consequence
each
of the community.
other.
Exactly. It's a natural
Yes.
consequence of being in a community with others, is that you all kind of like hop into, similar boats with each other to go on
Yes.
this journey together and to be able to share. And
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, I
And
totally
that's
agree.
not a bad thing. Like,
No.
in if we're influencing each other to be like more like active in our houses, think about how we can care for our families better, ways that we can cook more. And like it's like where I don't see where's the danger? The danger
Yeah.
is that you're going to be pressured into sourdough. Like,
Yeah.
it's like Does anybody truly have a gun to your head saying you need to make sourdough right now or we're not friends anymore? Like,
Or you'll
no,
be, or yeah, or you will not be saved unless you
no.
do X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
Ugh. Okay, we said we weren't
We-
going to talk about bread, but we talked about it again. Somehow the bread just keeps coming up. Okay, I want to I wanted to read Harrison Butker's speech, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to read it. I want to encourage you, maybe even give the episode a pause, and I want you to go search Harrison Butker's. He's an NFL player. He recently, I think it was in May, maybe
oh,
April.
I don't remember.
It was a college graduation, so it was graduation season. And Harrison Butker is a professing Roman Catholic. Marcella and I are Protestants. Our podcast is Protestant. We, our Facebook group, we have rules against speaking against Protestantism. So, but we do know that we have some Roman Catholic listeners, and you guys are so sweet to stick around, even though we are very explicitly Protestant. But I have a lot of appreciation for this man and the speech that he gave at this college graduation. And if you were on the internet during the time that this got big, it was crazy, the backlash
Yeah.
that he got. It was insane. And not
Yeah.
just by the secular world, but by conservatives and
Mhm.
also people that claim to be Christians. Now, I'm I'm not going to read it again. I encourage you to go read it because it is so beautiful. It is such a beautiful speech, particularly when he praises his wife. It
Mhm.
is like if my husband was a public figure and he spoke about me in this way, like I just like wow. Like what
Would feel
a
so appreciated and
yes.
honored. Yeah.
So, such an honor that he was talking about a ton of different subjects. A lot of people fixate on this part. It was a long speech. It was not only about how they're trads.
Yeah.
But essentially his main points in this particular part of the speech was he moved his speech to address specifically the women that were graduating from this Catholic college. Again, it wasn't a secular college, it was a Catholic college. He's a Roman Catholic. He may have been alumni. Don't quote me on that, but I think maybe he was alumni at this college. I can't remember. Um, he shifts to talk to the women that are graduating. And something that he says is extremely triggering to a lot of people, including some conservatives. And what he said specifically was that some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. And then he continues and goes on to praise his wife for all of the work that she does, saying that her most important title of all is a homemaker, that she's the primary educator of her children, that she's the one quote she's the one who ensures I never let football or my business become a distraction from that of a husband and father, meaning she's his helpmate. She's the
Mhm.
person who will knows me best at my core, and is through our marriage. He talks like in huge ways about his sweet wife, how much he loves her and praises her for being a homemaker, a wife, and a mother. And he makes sure to say that he cannot be successful as an NFL player and in his business ventures without her holding it down at home, doing her job at home as a homemaker. And I just thought it was absolutely beautiful. There's a few little things that I disagree with in his speech because he's a Roman Catholic that we disagree with theologically, but his speech in regards to how he praised his wife is just so inspiring. And I think that we should all aspire to have such a good reputation with our husbands that our husbands praise us, even just in their small circles, just like
Mhm.
this, like not all of our husbands are going to be public figures. The very small minority of men in the world are, but that we have such a good reputation and rapport with our husbands that they are quick to praise us. And Proverbs 31 talks about that her husband praises her in the gates, and the gates are like his place of work. Beautiful, beautiful speech. It was extremely triggering, especially because he was talking specifically to the women that were graduating. The overwhelming majority of people that heard this speech that were not at the graduation, I don't know if those women were mad or not, but the people that heard about the speech were upset. They were disgusted that he would deliver such a speech at a college graduation. So this is what I think. Do we want the women raising the next generation at home to be stupid and uneducated? Because everybody that was upset with him about directing towards the women, saying like, some of you may have a successful career and be, a working woman, but the majority of you, I hope, aspire to be homemakers, aspire to be wives and mothers. And I pray that this is what you desire. And people were offended by that, because how could he assert that an educated woman, a woman that is graduating college, would waste her life at home raising children and being a homemaker? It is very offensive to, probably both of us, and also just the majority of women that spend their days at home raising children and cultivating a home, that we should not be educated because it is a waste. Or that if we are educated women, it is a waste to be homemakers.
Yeah.
Although, so neither of us have received a college degree, although both of us have spent time in college for certifications and stuff like that. We don't think you need a college degree to be educated, by the way. I think we've made it pretty clear in past episodes. We were both homeschooled our whole lives by our mother. We love the pursuit of the love of knowledge. Marcel and I are very passionate about Charlotte Mason and philosophy of education, and we love to learn. We are lifelong learners. Both of us affirm that women should be educated. That doesn't mean that you have to have a college degree, but my point that I'm making is that for people to be up in arms that these women that have achieved, a very high honor of having a college degree in various fields, that it would be a waste for them, or that it is offensive to them that this man that made this speech would assert that they should be excited about being homemakers. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it, with some people, it like showed true colors in a sense of like what they really think about women who stay at home. And that somehow, if you were able to spend those however many years that you needed to in order to get whatever the degree was that you got, the time and money invested into it, that it's now useless at home. And I will say that some degrees are useless in today's day and age.
Right.
But we don't know the specifics of every single individual he was talking to in that room.
I would like to make a assertion based off of my own observations, and no, this is very anecdotal. Okay, this is not like I have surveyed the women of the world and this is what I've concluded. This is purely anecdotal from my own observations. The most common fields that I have noticed that young single women pursue following high school are the following: medicine, education, childcare, psychology, and creative arts. Do we not see that all of the careers I just listed, or majors in college that I just listed, along with many, many more that I didn't, I'm sure we could even come up with tons more, can be easily translated into a career at home benefiting her family with her particular knowledge and skills. It is so fascinating. Again, purely anecdotal. Nobody come and say, I have the survey that
Yeah.
says this is not true. But based on my own observations, and even I would venture to ask you, listener, if you if you are currently a working woman, or if you had a career before you became a stay-at-home wife and mom, or if you're currently in college, or you're a single woman waiting to get married, I would venture that the majority belongs in those 5 spheres that I just listed.
Yeah.
It is so interesting that medicine, education, childcare, and again, under each sphere, there's a ton of like
It'll branch off. Yeah.
branch
Yeah.
offs. But even with you and I, childcare and creative arts was our
Our main
careers.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And both of the careers that you and I had before we got married and before you had, 3 children, because you worked up until you had 3, we easily translated
Yeah.
into, like,
Absolutely.
your skills are easily translated from a career life to home life. My
Hmm.
skills that I had, and it's so interesting because everybody has been given different gifts from the Lord, and we are kind of like geared towards certain things naturally. It's so fascinating that the majority of women do pursue these maternal careers.
Hmm.
So I don't think he was off base at all. I
No,
think
I
he
don't think
was
so either.
right on that those women, that maybe some of them, again, like he said, some of them will have a lifelong career life. But the majority of women that are religious, they get into these careers that are more maternal geared or
Yeah.
creative.
Caretaking. Yeah.
Caretaking, medicine, even like I think psychology is a huge one. And again, that can also be
Yeah.
easily translated into
I was
home.
even going to say like some branch offs of like architecture and
Yep.
design and
Creative
things like
arts.
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
hmm
Yeah.
Easily translated into a life at home. And thinking about those women that were sitting there in the audience, that like maybe now their, marriage and family life is not as close on the horizon as others, but that like one day, Lord willing, when they do have family life, that it was not a waste. It
Hmm.
was not a waste. In fact, being an educated woman, or being passionate about something, especially like when you are young, you have time, like those things can easily turn into a fruitful and full home life. And you
Hmm.
can share those skills that you have with other women that don't
Hmm.
have the same skills, you
Yeah.
know? We've said it before a million times, and we'll say it again. Homemaking is a worthy vocation for women to dedicate their lives to. The work of a wife and a mother at home impacts generations and generations. So, although I think, like, of course, we have disagreements with Harrison Butker. I think his speech was needed, timely, and absolutely relevant, not just to the women that were in the audience that he was addressing, but to all of us. It inspired me as a homemaker. Like, it was so beautiful hearing him praise his wife like that. Like, I felt like I was like excited for her.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
just like, wow, like, is there anything else you want to say to that before we conclude with our final thoughts?
No, I think you touched on everything that I was thinking too.
Awesome. Okay, so all of this to say, addressing these 2 kind of cultural things that have happened in the past year in the conservative circles, are young women in danger, legitimate danger, from becoming influenced by the trads? It is very obvious to us in our current culture that the real danger for young Christian women is feminism. Feminism is wicked, poisonous, sinful, and we should flee from it. The imbalanced pursuit over careers, over family life, and home management is one of those big tenets of feminism. Another tenet of feminism is a hatred for children, including celebrating their murder and death through the means of abortion. Also, feminism, modern feminism, celebrates androgyny and transgenderism. And lastly, man-hating and overthrowing. This is the real, actual danger to young Christian women. And we need to be on guard that these things do not infiltrate our hearts. The overwhelming majority of things on the internet, in our world, even in creeping into our churches, is feminism. That is the real danger. The trads are not a danger to society. They're not a danger to young women. I think that young women should have discernment in separating what is a Christian virtue and what is a preference and what is, like you said, something beautiful, but that we should be careful to not equate the two. You know, I think that we should be careful and we should have discernment, but I don't think that young women are in danger. If the danger that we are worried about with the influence of trad wives are that young women may feel pressured to become wives, homemakers, mothers, learn to cook from scratch, adorn themselves with dresses, recover lost arts, and pursue a slower lifestyle, is that really something we should be honestly warning against? I think that we should spend our time, if we're going to warn and help the young women, the next generation of women, we need to be warning against feminism because it is evil and wicked. And again, like I said, we should be cautious about getting wrapped up with trends. Like we said in our first episode on the subject, the overwhelming majority of internet trends are more toxic and spiritually dangerous than trad wives.
Yeah. I think it would be helpful for all of us to kind of zoom out on the whole thing, because we have a very small, like you've been calling it, subculture on the internet of women who are embracing a more old-fashioned, maybe traditional lifestyle, even if that's not even just homemaking, but even gender roles, like all these different things. I think when we're just so tunnel visioned on what we are looking at on a day-to-day basis, we do forget what is the majority of other things out there, because, you know, our algorithms are so perfectly curated to us, and the content that we regularly interact with, that we follow, that we consume, all of that. And so, of course, it's going to push out more of that stuff to you. And so I think we can kind of lose sight of the fact that this is still so curated to me, and they've made it that way for a reason. That we forget that there is a whole other world of just evil and wickedness and things that are probably more relevant for us as like modern day Christian women to be on guard of and to warn others against. And so just being able to zoom out and look at the big picture, and to not just like, you know, say, well, if they're a trad wife, everything they say is correct and like, obviously test everything against scripture. And even then, if you're unsure, recruit the help of women in your community, and your older women who have maybe seen these trends, also have noticed things over their years and lifetime, like that can help you with, you know, parsing through these things. And so I think we're barking up the wrong tree here.
Amen, sister. I fully agree. And yes, we should be less concerned with internet trends and more concerned with our direct community and building one another up in love.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us today for our season finale episode. We've had so much fun. And please, again, subscribe to Patreon, add us on Facebook, on our Facebook group, Young and Wifed Up, and head to our Instagram. And we love you all so much. Thank you again for all of your support, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.